Hey guys, and welcome to a Young Heretics special edition. This is a new thing that we're doing whenever something really of great interest strikes my eye, whenever somebody's doing something that is, I think, really salutary in the public square, especially, of course, having to do with education and with passing on the great traditions. Governor Scott Walker was the governor of Wisconsin until very recently, where he stood up to a number of really down and dirty leftist attacks. He's now, very excitingly, the president of Young America's Foundation. Governor Walker is announcing what is called the long game, which is an effort to really take back education from this new sort of leftist surge. Governor Walker, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you on.
Thanks for having me on. Glad to be with you. Glad to be talking about the work we're doing really to train the next generation of America's freedom fighters.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that work. Maybe tell us, first of all, what YAF does more generally for folks who don't know, and then how this new initiative is going to play out.
Well, it really is about young people. It goes all the way back to 1960, when at the home of William F. Buckley, about 100 students gathered together. Then at very similar times, troubling, challenging times in our nation's history, they saw too much infiltration of the left, not only in college campuses, but in culture. And so they formed this group. One of the earliest leaders was Ronald Reagan, even before he was in elected office, and was supportive of us all the way through his time as president, and even afterwards, letting us own and operate the Reagan Ranch. But it's really about reaching college students and now increasingly even high school students with messages about freedom, free enterprise, individual liberties, things that historically have been a part of Reagan's legacy and so many other great conservatives. Today, we're in over 2,000 campuses where we support students with conservative thoughts. We're active in free speech issues. We're in high schools. But what we realized with all of this, it just wasn't enough. And that's why, as you mentioned, we pushed out this new plan starting right now, just in the early days of my time as president, in what we call the long game, to counteract really decades of actions on our campuses and our culture from the left.
That's fantastic. And yeah, I often say on this show that, this is a mode of educational capture that the left is actually very good at. The long march through the institutions, it was called in the 1960s. Rudy Duchke, the big, campus activist, essentially said, following Italian socialists like Antonio Gramsci, we are going to... Our ideas don't work, especially in America, where the middle class is relatively happy economically. So in order to persuade people that they need to revolt, that they need to be socialists, we're going to get them at a very young age, and we're going to make our way into all of the educational institutions. Is it fair to say that the long game is really a kind of counterattack on those same terms?
It really is. It's not enough just to be engaged in the battles. And believe me, we need to be engaged in the battles of the day, because there's plenty of big, important things happening, not only in our nation's capital, but across the country. But it's not enough. All too often, we're looking at the next immediate battle and losing sight for the future. For us, we got to win the battle and the war. And the war is really about the heart and soul of American culture, the framework of this great republic that we live in. And, Ronald Reagan warned about this back 32 years ago when he talked about how great things had turned around during his 8 years as president, but it felt like much of the patriotism we felt back then had not been reinstitutionalized, that parents were afraid to talk about the exceptional nature of this great country. And we've seen how that's come to root, not only in our college campuses, but increasingly even in our culture and lately, even in our communications with the censorship from big tech. And so our counter is we're not going to just be focused on the next news cycle, not even just on the next presidential cycle. We really are engaged in the long game. In fact, people want the facts. It's a 12-point action plan. It's not some white paper. It's not some initiative. It is action. It's a 12-point action plan called the long game. They can go to yaf.org/long game to get a free copy. It explains a little bit about what YAF's done over the years, but most specifically about what we're going to do going forward and partner with others like many of the folks tuning in right now, to figure out how they can get more students involved and how they can help us get to students at a younger age.
Right. Yes, this stuff is all connected. And sometimes when you talk to conservatives about this, they don't believe you that the college students of today are in the newsrooms of tomorrow. But we're watching this with the 1619 Project. We just saw, Teen Vogue is now eating its own, essentially kicking out its editor because the young people who are coming out of this, now several decades long education system genuinely believe that America is evil. It's not that way. And you mentioned Reagan. I don't know if people really know that Reagan had a heart for this, was deeply invested in this issue precisely, in making it not just culturally acceptable, but honorable to speak in true terms about how noble our founding was. I mean, he's going back there to the tradition of our greatest statesman. George Washington really believed this was essential. Abraham Lincoln said that patriotism should be taught to every lisping babe. And then, that warning that Reagan issued at the end of his presidency, saying, we really, people are afraid. They're afraid to say this, even if they believe it. That's, to me, that fear is a really important aspect of the college dynamic right now. I can't tell you how many people reach out to me and say, I hear what you're saying. Maybe I've seen a YAF speech, but I just don't think that I can risk being open about my conservative views. I just feel like there's so much risk. Can you talk a little bit about how the long game will help people, I guess, to counter that culture of fear?
Yeah, because you're right. We hear it all the time already with our students, that one of the things they love about getting together is that they understand they're not alone. Because the left, not only on campus, but increasingly in society, wants us to feel marginalized or just outright afraid of being attacked, of being called all sorts of awful things based on just having a difference of opinion. And so what we've been doing, we do effectively with our students, but it's just not enough. We're on about half of all the campuses, over 2,000, but there's 4,000 campuses in this country. I want to be on every college and university in America, whether it's government run or privately held. We've got to be out there, and not only with undergraduates, we've got to be out there with people getting their associate degree at community colleges and technical colleges. We've got to reach not only into high school, but in the junior high. I think back to 1980 when Ronald Reagan was running. I was 12 years old. What an impact he had on me, not only making me a conservative, but making me an optimist, loving America, believing in those founding principles. We need to pass that on to middle school and preteens as well. And then, as you mentioned, 1619 Project, we see stuff even seeping into elementary school. And so not only for the students there, but for their parents, giving them the materials to counter this, making the case for our founding principles, our iconic American leaders, Jefferson and Washington and others who were some of the early patriots to help build this country, returning to Judeo-Christian values. All those things are part of our action plan called the long game. And it's really about having, all sorts of things. 1 million more students participate, having a dynamic, dramatic increase in things like our YouTube participation, having 5 million subscribers on our YouTube channel, and a billion, that's a billion with a B, views, because we know in addition to all the speakers that we have, and we want to dramatically increase the number of in-person experiences on campus with speakers, but we also know we can literally reach millions more through things like YouTube, which is the number one way young people get their information. It's not Twitter, like most of the media think. It's actually through content-driven things like YouTube. So we take our substance, we get out there, and then where needed, we've already engaged, but we've got to up our efforts. We've, up until now, been engaged in free speech matters. When students come to us, we're going to aggressively go out and make sure that in every state, every part of this country, we're aggressively looking to make sure that no student, whether they're a member of YF or not, any conservative student, and for that matter, any conservative professor or teacher, shouldn't have to be fearful of speaking up. Free speech is guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution. It is an absolute guaranteed right. But unfortunately, where it should be revered, and that's on a college campus, is where it's most under threat. And we're going to take it to every campus, whether it's in the court of law or the court of public opinion. We're going to make sure that conservatives have a right to assemble, a right to organize with their chapters, be it our or any others, and particularly have a right to have conservative speakers on campus and in our schools, because they are increasingly being pushed out either through outright opposition or in many cases, bogus restrictions that aren't applied to other left-wing groups. We will use the Constitution as often as we need to. We will invoke it to guarantee the rights of our students and our speakers to speak out from a conservative point of view.
Right. I'm just going to reemphasize one more time for folks that they can go to yaf.org/long game to get a copy of this plan, which, I've read it. It's really, it's an exciting plan. It's something that I think a lot of people have been waiting for somebody to pick up the mantle and do this. And that speaks also to this issue that, you're suggesting, I think, rightly, that a lot of conservative points, which are not at this point, minutia of fiscal practice, but are, very basic truths about the human person, about our relationship to God, about, the relationship between male and female, right? These things are popular with the American people. A good example, right? This latest issue over transgender sports. It's a majority position in America to want boys to play boys sports and girls to play girl sports, and yet that's the kind of thing that can get you reviled for saying, as if this were a fringe issue. So the strength in numbers thing is really important. Can you tell us a little bit more about that First Amendment campaign that you have, how it is that you're finding bias in these campuses, and how you're fighting back against this specific targeting of conservative views, because it happens all the time.
Yeah. Again, not only if people go to our website to get the long game, the free 12-point plan that we've got, but they can go same spot, yaf.org/free speech. They can see the cases we're working on. Another one, yaf.org/tips. We have one of the most aggressive tip lines in the nation, and we're really exposing not only what's happening in our college campuses with professors and free speech violations and bias, and sadly, things like segregated training sessions for resident advisors and different graduation ceremonies based on race and income and gender, just all sorts of bizarre things that the left is imposing. But we're seeing it even not only there, but in our K through 12 education system. We had a big exposure of a BLM week of action, which had little or nothing to do last month with Black history and everything about liberal indoctrination. Those are things we've got to push back on. We're going to aggressively expose them. Part of our efforts here in opening a new center with our tip line is, again, not just to wait, but to be aggressive in seeking out examples where people feel like their free speech rights have been violated. We're going to aggressively go out. We work with the Alliance Defending Freedom as one of our great partners. We won in big cases. We know if we can win at UC Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley tried to block us from bringing Ben Shapiro in. We took them to court. They eventually settled because the Constitution, not just the law, the Constitution is on our side. And they had to back away from this bogus policy that many campuses invoke, where they impose security fees that are sometimes 3 or 4 times what left-leaning groups have to do. They had ridiculous things at Berkeley, like saying our chapter, our folks there couldn't advertise, they couldn't bring a speaker in after 3 p.m. All of this just outright barriers. And so we're doing that. Plus, another example, University of Kentucky, a public government-run institution, their student government blocked some of our folks from assembling. And they claim they were doing it, but we found in using freedom of information, open records, which are allowed under state law for public institutions, we found not just in their emails, but in an app they were using to communicate, that they were slow walking the process and joking about how they were dragging this out. Well, again, we're not going to stand for it under any circumstance. We got to push back, and we will defend the free speech rights of any conservative, again, whether they're a YF chapter, whether they're a member of our organization, or whether they're with any others, College Republicans, Students for Life, any other conservative group or voice on campus. We want to stand up and be a leader, certainly as part of this long game plan, in protecting the free speech rights of every conservative and of every conservative speaker to be able to come and share that message on campus as well.
Well, Governor Walker, I appreciate your coming on the show to tell us about it one more time for folks who want to find out more about this, and you should want to find out more about this because it's, everybody can get involved. It's the law, as you say, is on our side. It's yaf.org/longgame. Download it for free and find out how you can help. Governor Walker, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks for allowing me to be with you here today, and keep fighting for freedom.